too. Marilu will provide our prelude this morning.
I visited your house again, Nice of you to leave me a tough act to follow. Good morning. Today's subject, and you can take notes, there'll be a test afterwards, but no math, is political correctness and our obsession with words, or are we possibly focused in on the wrong words? My name is Marilu, and I am a transgender woman. Now, I know that sounds a little like we're here for a Sunday 12-step program, but really we're not. So you can trust me on this. The real reason that I announced myself that way was because as lovely as an example of feminine beauty that I am, I'm not just standing up here to be eye candy. No, we have actually something to say. Actually, I was asked if I might be interested in addressing this congregation on, some sort of issues pertaining to the LGBT community, and I thought, well, I don't know that I really have anything of a spiritual nature that I could, give to you people that, you haven't already gone over. But since I am one of those alphabet soup letters in the LGBT umbrella, I thought maybe it would be appropriate for me to express a couple of aspects of my transgenderedness and how that might relate to you. Transgenders, is that really a word? I think I just invented a new word, but the problem with that is now I'm going to have to run it past the official office of political correctness and see if it actually has any negative connotations, and that I, as an official transgender woman, am allowed to use it. You gotta love that political correctness, don't you? Has anybody here been following the war of words going on in the trans community and the gay community with RuPaul? And I mean, RuPaul committed a faux pas of enormous, humongous proportions by using the word tranny in one of her shows and by having a segment called She-Male. And the divide seems to be in the trans community along age lines, and the younger girls are all up in arms about the word tranny, which is something we've been using, not that I'm an old woman, but we have been using that word a long, long time, and it's never been a problem. But I mean, really, political correctness is such a simple and utterly brilliant Orwellian idea if a word's used to describe someone like me and then it's used by somebody else in a degrading or a disrespectful way. We can just eliminate all that disrespect by eliminating the word. So, what about this word tranny? It used to be a perfectly logical way to contract and shorten the entire litany of trans words that were used to describe us. And it was a perfectly good, simple, accurate, blue-collar, maybe even a little bit funny kind of play on words that now for some in our community has been deemed to be a dirty word. It used to mean me. I mean, that's all it ever really meant, was me and some of my tranny girlfriends. And, when we got together and had a tranny party, and it never had any real negative connotations up until recently. Now, up until very recently in world history, the trans community has been pretty much held with utter contempt and total disrespect by the world at large. So pretty much any kind of term, like tranny or any other word that is used to describe us, is going to end up being used as a term of derision. In my opinion, this politically correct solution of eliminating all the disrespect towards the trans community by just eliminating the words that communicate that respect is just folly. I mean, really, no disrespectful words equals no disrespect. It's just not that easy. In my lifetime, I've been described and even self-described with the entire trans litany of words, and the word transvestite was, back when I was young, was the only word they used to describe us. I never really liked that term, but there's been cross-dresser, transsexual, transgender, queen, T-girl, trans, tranny, he, she, boy, chick, T, TV, TS, TG, CD, and last but not least, the ever lovely and talented she-man. Now, all those words have been used to describe us, and almost every one of these words at some point or another has been termed and deemed a dirty word. And all any of these words ever really meant was me. Now, there may be some aspects to my personality and my overall being that could be best described by a dirty word or two. But I am just getting sick and tired of every word that means me being declared a dirty word. At what point does my little self-respect have to go down with it? You eliminate disrespect. Seriously, you eliminate disrespect by earning respect, not by demonizing the words that people use to communicate disrespect. And God forbid we as a trans community should have to go out into the community and stand up for ourselves and to just go out and be part of the community and to change people's attitudes by actively being part of the community. Now, don't misunderstand what I'm saying. The same basic human respect is due to every human being on Earth. But as a transgender community, we can't expect, after staying hidden away in our closets for all of recorded history, to suddenly pop out into an already complex and confusing modern society and expect everyone to say, please just complicate my life a little bit more. But the concept that men are men and women are women has been a fundamental truth that everyone's taken for granted for as long as there's been human beings. And now that that's not exactly true, it might just take a little bit of getting used to. Now, I would think that most people are not that enthused about the idea of going to check with the word police every other month just to see how to be civil to me. Not that I wouldn't object to that, but really. That was supposed to be funny too. If I gotta tell you the joke points, this isn't gonna work at all. Now, I guess the point that I'm really trying to make is that while I do acknowledge the debt that I owe to political correctness for opening the door so that I could be able to escape the closet and be myself and be out in the world and to be out here in front of you all today. I do think that there's a fine line, however, between effectively reminding people that we've chosen to make our society a better place for everyone and in making ourselves look just petty and absurd. And once you cross over that line, you just become counterproductive and you look foolish doing it. And I do think that the current word war going on within the trans community and spilling over, pitting trans girls against gay boys is just a battle that's shouldn't be being fought now. It's the wrong battle at the wrong time, and it is both counterproductive and foolish. Now, I'd like to take this opportunity to thank all the members of this church and, in fact, Unitarians across the country, because you all have sort of taken on the role of, and actually I just found out it's not just an assumed role, you actually have something called the Welcoming Committee, but really you've taken on the task of being the Welcoming Committee to the LGBT rights movement, pretty much into the mainstream of society. And I, as a transgender woman, have personally benefited by your actions and your deeds. And so I personally want to take this opportunity right now to thank you all for everything that you've done for me, even though you never even knew me, because you did change my life. And thank you very much. You can give yourselves a hand. Now that I've buttered you up, I'm about to run the risk of sounding somewhat hypocritical here, but of course I'm not, and you can trust me on this. No, you really can't. But I would like to talk about some common words that can be hurtful, even though we're trying to be polite. In English class, which was so long ago, Not sure I even remember being in school, but I know they had something called a pronoun, and at that time I never thought it would be important to me to know what the heck pronoun was, so I never really paid attention. But, you know, in high school maybe I was a little bit more of a smart ass than a smart student. But anyway, we'll have a little thought experiment here. And just imagine, it's not a hard one. So just imagine you're in a room, just your everyday sort of normal activity, and you're just hanging around, and all of a sudden the door opens, and into that room that you're in your everyday kind of situation, this rather tall, utterly gorgeous, I mean simply stunning, maybe a little chubby woman walks in, and you sense that there's something special about her, but you just don't know what. So you start to engage in a little conversation, and then when she opens her mouth, and a slightly less than feminine voice comes spilling out, and all of a sudden in the back of your head, alarms are going off, and you don't know what's going on. Confusion is all about you. And I mean, what do you do now? Different parts of your brain are telling you that this is a woman and that this is a man, and what is appropriate. I mean, really, how do you address him/her? Mr., Miss, Mrs., he, she, it, dude, dudette, sweetie pie. But really, this is the tricky part, because she's obviously presented as a woman and should be addressed as such, but try as you might to exhibit the kind of common courtesy that you always give everyone. There's something in your brain that keeps telling you to say sir, and it's the part of the brain that automatically tells you things that you don't really have to think about. All those everyday things that your brain does for you automatically, without you having to think about them, is now about to shove you. Maybe not that big, but really, most of us do value common courtesy and polite discourse, and it's an uncomfortable feeling when we don't have it. Now, of course, the Unitarians are so far ahead of the curve when it comes to social enlightenment that I know that nobody in here has ever misgendered anybody, and probably never will, but the general public is nowhere near as enlightened as this congregation. But the fact is, with the Unitarians leading the way, this overall acceptance of the LGBT community has progressed so much farther within our lifetimes than any of us hippie-era people would have ever dreamed possible. And because of this, more and more transgender women and more transgender people are starting to believe that they can live their lives openly as themselves with the happiness and peace of mind that stems from being free. More and more transgender people are opting to transition and live rather than to die as a suicide statistic. And that, my friends, is directly because of the work that you have started and continue to do. It also makes someone like me, a fully out transgender woman, not that uncommon anymore. We are starting to be seen everywhere in every walk of life, and while innocently and absent-mindedly using the wrong pronouns may seem innocuous, and really, while almost nobody actually is trying to be rude or hurtful, let me illustrate for you just how that can be so. Now, in 2006, I started the transition, and for obvious reasons, not that I'm really going to admit that, but I realized I was not going to be as passable as I would have liked to have been. And I knew that going in, that I was going to have to endure certain forms of humiliation, but really, I thought that I would be immune to being made to feel less like a woman by insensitive and rude remarks. And it's not that I didn't get rude remarks, it's just that I just refused to let them bother me. But then, after 8 years, it finally happened to me. I was invited to play guitar and sing at a local open mic night, and I went, and it was all new people that I didn't know, they didn't know me, and I just knew the person that had invited me. And when I walked in, I was warmly greeted and well received, and in fact, when I played, I got as much, if not more, applause than anybody else there that night, and all the other performers were very good. I had just held my own in a room full of very good folk singers, and I was being accepted as a peer among them, and that's something I've been trying to accomplish since the first time I picked up a guitar as a child. I would have thought, and it still amazes me, that the emotional high that I was on that night would have easily shielded me from any kind of accumulation of small and petty hurts but for some reason that night it didn't. And again, no one was trying to be rude or hurtful, but every time somebody made a reference to me or talked to me directly, it was using male pronouns. Every he and him and dude and hey guy and other references to me as a male and not a female began to cut like a knife. And eventually I had to answer nature's call, and I asked the female bartender where the washroom was, and she pointed to the men's. That little arrow went right to my heart. It was fired by a woman, no less, and no, not to make a sexist remark, but generally women are a lot more sensitive to using the right pronouns than men are. At that point I started to really feel uncomfortable, but the final blow came later that evening when we were leaving, and I was standing outside the front door, and we were standing on the sidewalk talking about the possibility of another open mic night and if I wanted to participate. And we were standing real close to this car, and there was a bar across the street. The guy who owned the car was drunk and came across at that time, went to get in his car, and then in the middle of our conversation, all of a sudden I hear, "Hey, what are you, a man or a woman?" I said, "Well, I'm a woman." He said, "Yeah, well, you sound like a man," so I had to ask. And I said, "Yeah, I get that a lot. I don't have the best, the highest of voices." And so we tried to finish our conversation, and we did. And what Mike did is something we all pretty much do: is you have an automatic way that you say goodbye. It just pops out. You don't really think about it. And I said, "Okay, I'll see you at the next one." And I said, "Okay, dude, I'll see you then." And when that drunk heard the word "dude," you'd have thought he struck oil. You'd have thought diamonds were falling from the sky, because he started hooting and hollering and carrying on like there was no tomorrow. And for the first time since I transitioned in 8 years, and I've been to biker bars doing karaoke and never felt unsafe, for the first time I felt fear. Now, there's something that goes on that I never used to have any understanding of. And it seems like every couple of years you see in the news where somebody that's been a fugitive for 20 or 30 or 40 years turns themselves in after successfully living under the radar, and it's like, why would anybody do that? After I transitioned, I think I came to have an understanding of their motivations, because I think they're very similar to what trans people's motivations are. When a transgender woman comes out and commits to transitioning to being a woman full-time, the first thing that virtually all of us feel, and will blab to everyone who's within earshot, is this overwhelming feeling of happiness and relief that comes from not having to hide anymore and not being afraid you're going to be exposed anymore. And for most of us, that word happiness has real meaning for the first time in our lives. And when we finally find out what it feels like to be happy, most of us feel that this newfound happiness will be all of the protection that we need to help us to survive all the crap that we just invited life to throw in our laps. Now, transitioning to womanhood late in life, as I did, has kind of its own special set of problems. And it's not that transitioning at any time in life is not overrun with problems, but for me, one of the problems that's harder as you get older is developing a female-sounding voice. And for me, this has been a particularly difficult problem, obviously. And when you first meet people, they perceive you as a man or a woman, really based, and it's done subconsciously, and it's based on cues from both your voice and how you look. And for me, my deep male-sounding voice is something that, while I have not given up on developing a better one, and I practice all the time, I've had to live with on a day-to-day basis. And again, what I found out that night was that even though I am as big as a barn, if you throw enough stones at me, my windows are just as fragile as everybody else's. Now, the point of all this is to illustrate just how all those little misgendered pronouns and little misgendered references to those of us who are already struggling to become and stay positive about our lives, how they can really be destructive. And yes, even though you didn't mean for them to be, they can be very hurtful. Now, I think we can all agree that drunken boneheads will always be drunken boneheads, and I'm really not confident that politely asking them to be a little more thoughtful is really going to be effective. But what would be helpful and what would be effective is if the vast majority of the undrunk people, you know, the people that do believe in politeness and common courtesy, just keep in mind that the nicer, kinder, more respectful kind of society that we're all striving to achieve includes just a little bit more attention, just a hair, a few hairs, more attention to the fact that I'm a woman and not a man in a dress. Actually, I have the next portion of the service. I'm going to sing another song for you. This one's by Arlo Guthrie. Well, actually, I'm singing it. But it was written by Arlo Guthrie a long time ago. stream, run and flow, leave the sand on which they go, stretching down like they had known that they're going home. Mountain stream, run and flow, leave the sand on which they go, stretching down they had known, going home. Sunrise and tree